field with about 50 or maybe 100 firefighters literally covered with soot and debris. I'm also with CBS News correspondent Byron Pitts, who you'll hear from in a moment. We are dealing right now with the aftermath of this second collapse. We were right here, Byron and I, in the thick of things when it happened. It went down. You could hear it, and then you could see people running. I actually was outside the building, the school that evacuated. They're evacuating the next school as well, Stuyvesant, trying to get people out of the line of fire at this point. I was outside the building where people were wheeling injured victims of this.
Because there is such tension in the region and such tension here today, which is extraordinary, that people wanting everywhere to reassure or find out about what has happened to those Douglas at Capitol Hill. And because we do know that the leadership of the Senate, at least, Senator Lott, Senator Daschle, were moved to a secure location while much of this was going on, but it is very difficult to get through on anybody's cell phone. And this is, Pierre Thomas, another reminder of, you wonder if this
terrorism against our nation will not stand.
Is widely reported to be a well-orchestrated orgy of terrorism. It's filled the skies of lower Manhattan and much of the whole island of Manhattan and Washington, D.C. with black smoke. The streets of both cities have had some chaos. The number of injured and dead is unknown. At the moment, the core, the heart of the story, is the collapse of the World Trade Centers. How many people have been injured and killed? Unknown. But we have to face the fact, because it is a fact, that an attack on the World Trade Centers has been devastatingly effective, collapsing both of the Twin Towers. This will go down as a kind of Pearl Harbor of terrorism in Manhattan, New York today. To say nothing of Washington, where the Pentagon has had explosion and flames. Witnesses said that aircraft of some kind went into the Pentagon. That has not been confirmed. A car bomb exploded outside the outside the State Department in Washington. Government shutdown in Washington, D.C. All employees have been advised to go home. I want to double check whether that's Washington, D.C. and or New York. Washington and New York. All non-essential New York City employees have been asked to return home. Secretary of State Colin Powell is returning to the United States from a trip from Peru. President Bush was in Florida this morning visiting some school children. He's on his way back to Washington, D.C. All New York City airports are closed. All entry into the city by tunnel and bridge have been closed. We're not absolutely certain of the George Washington Bridge, but I believe all bridges and tunnels, at least for a while this morning, into the city of New York were closed. And this is the reason. This picture you're looking at here, those of you familiar with New York, this is the great harbor of New York City with the Statue of Liberty just down in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, roughly. There you can see the Statue of Liberty off to the left. This is smoke on the water of the Hudson River, New York City Harbor, and we will show you on videotape again the collapse of the second of the World Trade Center buildings. One had collapsed earlier, and then there was this collapse. "110 stories down to the ground. There's been a fourth explosion at the World Trade Center. Just reported. Claire McIntyre was an eyewitness to this collapse of the World Trade Center. Ms. McIntyre?
Yes, hi.
What did you see?
Well,
what did you feel? What did you hear?
I'm on the 91st floor of Building 1, and I faced the north side, and I was at my computer, and I heard the plane, and then I saw it hit right above us. The 92nd or 93rd floor probably, or even 94. And our whole floor just fell to pieces practically, and we got out though. Everybody in my company got out. And we walked down the stairs, and when we got down to the bottom, it was like a war area. It was just, there were bodies on the ground in pieces, I'm sorry to say. And when we came out, we were walking up the block to get away from the building, and that's when 2 World Trade Center blew up, and and we were just in a cloud of darkness, and we had to feel our way to some clearness, and we've been pretty much walking ever since, trying to get north.
Ms. McIntyre, if you can stay with us for just one moment, I want to interrupt and say, Dateline Pittsburgh, large plane crashes are reported in western Pennsylvania. The source of this are officials at Somerset County Airport. No further details are available. We've had these large plane crashes reported now in western Pennsylvania, car bomb going on outside the State Department in Washington. No further details on that. Fire and explosion at the Pentagon. Eyewitnesses say an aircraft of some kind possibly went into the Pentagon, and then here in New York, the collapse of these two World Trade Center buildings. Ms. McIntyre, eyewitness to what's been happening down there. You said you saw one of the planes as it came into the building.
I did. I actually saw it after it was already partially into the building. I saw the wings and the tail.
Was it a large aircraft?
It looked fairly large. I didn't think it looked as large as I'm hearing it probably was. I thought it was a small jet. It sounds like maybe it was larger than I thought.
Well, but you are the eyewitness. I recognize what a horrific scene that the part of the aircraft was already inside the building when you first saw it.
That's correct.
And did it look to you to be a large airliner?
It looked like a small airliner to me.
Would you say 2 engines or 4, or would you be able to say?
I wouldn't, because that part of the plane was already in the building when I saw it.
Ms. McIntyre, you said that, unfortunately, that you saw people who were killed.
Yes.
Where were those people, and about how many?
I saw definitely two bodies in the plaza down below when we got out of the stairwell. And they were walking us through the plaza, I think trying to make us go very quickly so we didn't see anything. But I definitely saw two bodies that were just torn to shreds.
Did you hear the airplane as it approached?
Yeah, I certainly did.
Describe that sound for me.
Oh, it was horrible. It was the sound of a jet plane coming right at you.
The officers on the roof of the White House, looking in the distance as they always do, talking occasionally to each other. There doesn't seem to be a high level of tension there. What's it like on the ground?
Well, there's considerable tension on the ground, Peter. We are actually looking at a similar picture because we're across the street from the White House now in the Hay Adams Hotel. The entire area around the White House has been completely evacuated. It's very quiet. The police seem tense. They're carrying automatic weapons. We've also seen a couple of what appear to be fighter jets overhead. Everybody in this area has been sent home from all major government offices. It's a reverse commute. The highways, we're told, are just jammed. As you know, President Bush is on his way back to the White House. They've checked his plane considerably before sending him on his way. But as you mentioned, these guys on top of the White House roof are almost always here. And ever since that incident a few years ago when a plane actually landed on the White House lawn, they've upped security measures so that they wouldn't have any other aircraft nearby. And that may be why they seem a little more relaxed than other areas around town. As you know, the AP has been reporting that there was a car bomb that went off at the State Department, and a lot of people are talking about that. And there's also been some report that there were bomb threats on Capitol Hill, but we're still trying to find out more about that, Peter.
Thanks very much, Claire. There are indeed reports from the Federal Aviation Administration that there are possibly 1 or 2 more planes that have been hijacked this morning and are still missing. When you think of the number of aircraft that crisscross the United States, not to mention fly overseas every day, this is the Pentagon. This is the Pentagon. This is live coverage from the Pentagon now, which gives you some sense of the force with which this aircraft, described to us as a small commuter-sized aircraft, flew into a side of the Pentagon coming from the south this morning. And again, the communications in the country are so difficult at the moment, and as you've heard beginning to hear from everybody, the cell phone network is choked for a variety of reasons, that it's hard to get a handle at this point on casualties at the Pentagon or the extent of damage. The one place in which we can be focused, because it is such a small place, Manhattan, 11 miles long, is the Twin Trade Towers, and by some remote chance, if you've just joined us on television, the Twin Trade Towers in New York City have been destroyed, with hundreds, presumably, or perhaps thousands of people in them. Each of the two towers was struck today, attacked today by an aircraft, one of which at least we know was hijacked. And this is the second tower that went just a few minutes ago. A scene of chaos and devastation in the lower part of New York City, right on the edge of the Hudson River. Everybody in the United States is familiar with the Twin Trade Towers, and we have no idea whether there were tourists there who show up every morning to go and stand on the top of the trade towers, because it is one of the most expansive views south, west, and north of the city and the area itself. Bill Blakemore is down there. Bill, do you hear me?
I do, Peter.
Go ahead.
I'm just north of Canal Street, just a few blocks north of the trade tower area. Throngs of people have been, of course, moving north. Some of them silent, most of them looking stunned, just saying we're just trying to get out of the area after both towers have collapsed. We're seeing Delta Wing jet fighters circling overhead just one at a time. When the first one appeared, the group of people amid which I was standing shrieked and said, "Oh my God, there's another attack," and then they realized that being a Delta Wing jet fighter, it was probably the U.S. military, which of course it seems to be. There's just a couple of helicopters, apparently police helicopters, circling overhead. And on this very clear morning now, the unusual sight is the lack of the trade towers sticking up above the buildings that are normally here. People have now begun to accept, but just barely begun to accept what's happened. All business at a complete standstill, nothing but sirens down here as these throngs move further and further north, just walking away from what they can barely begin to understand. Peter?
Bill, how far north did this, I mean, we looked at some streets which debris had just gone in a huge, wide area.
Right. I seem to be just north of where that hit. I'm just up at Canal, so there seem to have been enough low-lying buildings, that is no more than, say, 20 or 30 stories high, between us and the base of the tower to have protected people here from the debris. But here's another man walking past me, just looking completely dazed, going north. Two or three other women. The crowds are beginning to thin out now, as most of the people who were just standing around and watching or working there. One woman came up just talking a mile a minute with her daughter and her friend and her daughter, describing how they had gone to their school this morning. She was about to go to the trade tower to pick up something from a shop there when her daughter said, "I want a sandwich, Mommy," and so she stayed back. She said, "Otherwise I would have been there." They're still trying to understand how they're so lucky not to have been over there. There must be thousands of such stories here this morning, Peter, of those that were the lucky ones.
Thank you, Bill. Please stay in touch as often as you can. It's now 10 minutes to 11 Eastern Time, 10 minutes to East in 2 minutes to 8 in the West. And I'm just going to add to the chaos and the trauma of the day by saying that a large plane has now crashed just north, or shouldn't I say just, but crashed about 10 o'clock in the last 15 minutes, north of Somerset County Airport, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. This is reporting from one of the Pittsburgh television stations as a result of a 911 call from the airport itself. There are no other details on this crash yet. And it's not clear whether the crash was related to anything else that has happened in the country today. But the plane, which was believed to be a Boeing 767, crashed about 10 a.m., just about 8 miles east of Jennerston, Pennsylvania. People in the area will undoubtedly be reporting in more clearly to us on that. The New York mayor's race is having a primary today. That has now been canceled. Both on the Republican and the Democratic side, there was I apologize for interruption. Somebody's trying to say something. Go ahead, please. Okay, just stand by just for 1 second while I just finish. Just repeating, the New York mayoralty primary has been canceled today, and As we said, there's reaction coming in from the Middle East, including a claim of responsibility, then a denied responsibility, now a message from the Palestinian President Yasser Arafat condemning the aircraft attacks on the World Trade Center and sending the condolences of the Palestinian people to those who have been victimized by it. Outside the Pentagon, another member of our ABC News staff, Chris Dreer. Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Peter.
So would you tell us what you can see?
Yes, Peter. I'm standing at the fringe of Arlington Cemetery watching the Pentagon as the top of it caves in. There's a lot of black smoke, a lot of twisted debris. The Pentagon itself has caved in from the top. There is much fire coming out of the windows. It looks like something from World War II, Peter.
Chris, can you tell me, it's a little hard to tell on television, how much of the building has collapsed? How wide is it? How deep is it? Do you have a sense of that?
Yes, I do, Peter. The center portion of the Pentagon appears to be breached. That is, apparently there's a courtyard, and the of that is completely caved in from where I am, from where I see it.
Okay, I think you're on a cell phone, Chris, but just confirm for me that a portion of the building has been breached and the aircraft appears to have pushed its way through into the courtyard?
Yes, indeed it has. I believe, Peter, that that's where the plane is, but I am not sure at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Is there any evidence, is there any movement around there at the moment? We're looking at a fairly static picture. Are there people arriving, people disappearing, ambulances coming?
Peter, there's a great deal of glass and wind fire coming out of the windows, but on the other side of the Pentagon is where most of the emergency vehicles are now. I'm going to try and get around to that side to see what I can see.
Okay, thank you very much. I should tell you that all military personnel in the District of Columbia area now, all military personnel in the district, are now on something that is called Threat Level Delta, which is the highest state of alert in the military, and all other people, all other military personnel in the country are now on alert status Charlie, which, John Miller, we know is a somewhat lower status of alert, but still a reminder that this disaster has spread like wildfire through all of the political and military establishment in the country. All museums and monuments in Washington are now shut for the day. It's ironic to hear Claire Shipman telling us there that tourists are still standing around waiting to get into the White House today. Not surprisingly, unfamiliar perhaps with what has happened everywhere else, though, as it was, for example, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, word spread dramatically, mouth to mouth, person to person across the country in a huge wave of information and emotion and confusion. And now I just want to sort of, as often happens, to contradict some of the earlier reporting from Washington. Our State Department sources now believe that there was no car bomb at the State Department, as was reported a little earlier by a number of sources in Washington. We believe there was no car bomb at the State Department, so the State Department at this point is free of violence, but it has been evacuated, as has the Congress, as has the Treasury building. And we've told you several times that the leadership of the House and the Senate, at least the Senate anyway, have been taken to a location which is deemed to be secure. There is still some concern among our intelligence sources in Washington that one more aircraft somewhere is unaccountable, or is unaccounted for, I should just say. Pierre Thomas, I know you're talking as best you can under the circumstances to all of your sources in the FBI. This is your beat. What are they telling you, if anything?
Well, early on today, they were saying that they thought that there was at least one hostage situation in terms of the plane being hijacked, but they were scrambling just as we are, trying to get additional communication, trying to get additional information, and that's one of the problems early on in a disaster like this, is they're trying to get the information in, they're trying to sort through what they have, and then make decisions based on that.
Okay, but does it appear to be an orderly procedure as far as you can tell throughout the country?
Yes, what they do in these cases, the Special Operations Center, which is based at the FBI headquarters in Washington, will go on full alert. The FBI Director, Deputy Director Tom Picard, will come down. They will begin to communicate with their facilities throughout the U.S. It's interesting to note, Bob Mueller, The FBI, new director of the FBI,
hardly been on the job at all.
has not been on the job more than 2 weeks. So he's now being baptized by fire in terms of how to deal with a crisis like this.
Okay, Pierre, thanks very much. Pierre Thomas, who covers the Justice Department and is sitting here working the phones, trying to get through. Because in some respects, what you're looking at on television, with the one exception of the collapse of the buildings in New York City in the last hour, it doesn't begin to convey, and nor can we, the tension in the country from everywhere, because you not only have something happening, but you have all of this reporting coming in from otherwise, from respectable intelligence, information, police agencies saying there are other things to be worried about. John Miller, who's sitting with me, covering New York City in his ear, because he knows these police networks so well, had a sense that the second tower was going to go, and other people must have had the same thing.
They did. The first indication was they started to broadcast reports that they felt it was leaning and that there was a buckle in the northwest corner. And then as you and I were speaking live, they said it's going, and it went.
On the phone with us, I think from Washington at the moment, is Vince Canestraro, with whom we often discuss matters of terrorism. Vince, can you hear me? Vince, can you hear me? Vince Canestraro? Okay, when we make it.
One thing that's
Vince, can you hear me, Vince Canestraro?
Yes, I can.
Okay, well, I don't know what else to do at the moment except to ask your observations on this, because... Just go ahead.
Well, it's a pretty stunning event, a sequence of events. I think most of the intelligence information available to the U.S. government pointed at attacks at U.S. installations abroad, most recently in Asia. I think that no one had really anticipated a major attack on U.S. soil.
Why not? Come on, Vince, why not? Why should in the wake of Oklahoma City, in the wake of the attack on the trade towers and all this talk about international terrorism with its tentacles everywhere, why did nobody anticipate it happening here?
I think they anticipated only more sophisticated biological or chemical attacks from terrorist groups. But this was a series of attacks using conventional means, hijacked plane, suicide bombers. I don't think anyone in the intelligence community really anticipated that the terrorist groups that they had identified had the capability to do these kinds of events inside the United States. Now, were they wrong? Obviously. And should they have anticipated a level of cooperation among alienated groups, terrorist groups that wanted to punish the United States? Certainly, they should have. But I don't think anyone anticipated that any of the groups could have done this kind of coordinated, synchronized terrorist events.
Yeah, I want to know more about that, Vincent. I don't mean to have you have to defend the intelligence community, but we hear this all the time. Groups are not sophisticated to do this. Did the intelligence community fall in love with the notion of biological and chemical attacks and not anticipate that guys could hijack airplanes? They've been doing it since the 1970s.
I don't think there's any question about that. They were anticipating new kinds of threats. All the money in the counterterrorism budget went towards preparation for a BW or nuclear attacks on U.S. soil. But what we have seen time and time again, that terrorists are able to exploit conventional materials in a very devastating way. What McVeigh did at Oklahoma City in 1995, using commercially available materials to some devastating effect, although they weren't the casualties that we see today. But 1993,
Hey, but Vince, let me interrupt you for a second, and I apologize. I sound like on the attack here, but there's a feeling in that. You notice I haven't called anybody a terrorism expert this morning.
I don't think anyone wants to be known as a terrorism expert.
Thank you very much. And
today.
but we have a series of terrorism experts who appear in our lives and sometimes sound off knowledgeably. I exclude you from this, by the way, otherwise I wouldn't raise it in your precedent. Sound off, knowledgeably about how we know this group and that group and that group. And this is, among other things, a desperate failure of intelligence in both the human and technical area. Am I right?
No, there's no question about it, Peter. It's a major intelligence failure, the inability to anticipate this kind of a terrorism event on U.S. soil. I think that they were focused on bin Laden in Afghanistan. They were focused on U.S. facilities abroad, and I don't think they believed that bin Laden or a consortium of groups collaborating together had the capability or the willingness to do this kind of thing. Is that a false assumption? Obviously. Yeah. We saw what they did with the USS Cole last year. It was a very sophisticated U.S. warship that was almost totally destroyed with the loss of 17 lives by suicide bombers.
And just one other thing before I let you go back and work the sure. beat for us, if you would, and that is Osama bin Laden. Mm-hmm. Some of my colleagues and I argue here about the U.S. emphasis on bin Laden. It's bin Laden, bin Laden, bin Laden. It's if the United States gets only one focus at a time right. in terms of somebody involved in terrorism. Has the intelligence community fallen in love with the notion that only bin Laden can do this?
No, I don't think they have. They certainly have focused on bin Laden as the bête noire and as the architect of terrorism against U.S. officials, U.S. citizens. But in this case, the resources and the coordination and the direction to do these kinds of events requires capabilities beyond any one single group. In other words, there had to be cooperation, possibly with some state support, to do this kind of thing.
Okay.
I mean, we've been hearing for the last 2 months that bin Laden was getting ready to do something, but I don't think anyone was looking here as the object of his next event.
Okay, Vince, I much appreciate it, and I hope you go work the beat for us and you check back with us through the day. I'm, by the way, this is not for an immediate discussion, but I'm sitting next to John Miller of ABC News, who you've heard often this morning. He's one of the only reporters in the world to have gone to see Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. And as the day goes on, we'll clearly deal with this in even greater depth, John, than at the moment. But what we are now dealing with is a devastating human tragedy as the result of terrorism in New York City and in Washington, D.C. And just before I talk to John Cock, well, I'm more than happy to listen to these people on the street if we can possibly hear from them. But just in case, by some remote possibility, at 8 o'clock Pacific time, along the West Coast, you've just turned on your television or you're continuing to watch it, let me just review for you where we think we are at the moment. Because it is both a tragedy that has revealed itself before the eyes of millions of people in the country watching on television, and a complete mystery as to how, as we heard from Vince Canestraro just a moment ago, how this could have happened in such a coordinated way without any of the intelligence service of the United States having much a clue about it. So just before 9 o'clock this morning, just at about 8:50, an aircraft, which we now believe had been hijacked and flew into a building, hit a building. And then shortly after that, that was at 9 o'clock, or just after it showed up on the wire services about 9:04. We could see it happen live on television as a second aircraft hit the other tower of the twin trade towers in New York City. Thousands of people had just arrived at work. As time passed, we understood that these aircraft had been, we believed, hijacked in both instances. Perhaps certainly one, an American Airlines aircraft which was destined for Los Angeles, had been hijacked and flown. Pilot either forced to fly, very hard to believe, and of course we'll never know unless they find the black boxes from these aircraft, or somebody on board that aircraft killed or got rid of the pilot and went to the controls and flew the plane into the building themselves. And then as much of the country began to connect and try to grapple with this, then we had this horrifying circumstances of first one of the towers, this is the second aircraft flying in, then first one of the towers and then the other tower collapsing on itself with, at the very least, hundreds and probably thousands of people who did not manage to get out of the building after the two initial collisions. And the country, the political and military establishment of the country just began to lock down very quickly. First of all, there was concern at the White House because outside the west side of the White House, behind the Executive Office building, we then began to see that there was fire, and that was what appears now to have been an attack on the Pentagon. Just shortly thereafter, this was this other tower of the Pentagon, the first tower of the Pentagon, which began to fall down upon itself. The World Trade Centers, of course, is what I mean. Thank you. Just stay out of my ear for a second. I'm trying to bring people up to date on the order of which things happened. So we then had New York City's airspace all around locked down. The airports closed down at LaGuardia and Newark and John F. Kennedy. Nobody was allowed to take off. And then shortly after that, the Federal Aviation Administration became involved and told aircraft nowhere in the country to take off. And then all aircraft flying anywhere in the country, because there was so much concern, and there is still some, that there is an aircraft somewhere out in the country which has been unaccounted for. All aircraft in the country were ordered to land immediately at the nearest airport. And then, of course, the second devastating thing at the trade towers themselves, when the second trade tower collapsed on itself. The president was in Florida, and the president down in Florida today to talk about education came very quickly to the cameras, clearly as shocked as any of us in the rest of the country. He talked to the FBI and others. He immediately canceled his education trip to Washington today, to Florida today, and said he was going to come back to Washington, which is exactly what the country expects of him. And he said very briefly on camera that this terrorism against the United States will not stand. As we've said before, the kind of thing he had to say. And John Cochran went to Florida with him. And John, I think you're still in Florida and the president came home. Is that my understanding?
That's right. We're grounded like all other Americans. The airport here is close to us. The president is on his way back, but we don't know where he's going to land. You know, normally, Peter, the president would land at Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland, a military base, a secure base just outside of Washington, D.C. However, network camera crews have been barred from going to Andrews Air Force Base. It apparently has been roped off and barred to news media. We do not know if the president is going there, and the White House is being very close-mouthed about it. And you can understand why they would want to create the question in some people's minds as to where the president will land. We've been told that when the president returns, he will have a National Security Council meeting. But where will that happen? Will it be in Washington? I can't help but think back to November 22nd, 1963, the assassination of John Kennedy. At that time, the Secret Service was in a great hurry to get the new president, Lyndon Johnson, back to Washington, D.C., a safe place. It's no longer clear today that Washington, D.C. is such a safe place, Peter.
Thank you very much, John. Please stay in touch and let us know when you can make your way to Washington. The uncertainty in Washington has led authorities to ask the political leadership in the Congress, we know at least in the Senate, to go to a safe location. Earlier reports about a bomb outside the State Department, we believe, are now not correct. But there was this attack on the Pentagon, and there's this mixture in Washington of deep, profound tension and almost and alertness. You certainly get a quick glimpse there of the security force, which is a constant presence on the roof of the White House, on guard there. But there is a natural instinct, not only for the president to go to Washington, not merely for the security, but because it's the nation's capital, and it's where all of us in the country will look to the president for leadership and response in the...
...who is responsible. But until that time, we can only speculate.
But Brian, in an attack of this magnitude that is so carefully coordinated and executed with such cold-blooded efficiency, it obviously had to be a very sophisticated organization.
Clearly, this took organization, and while organization has in terrorism in recent years become more fluid, that is, we are not dealing with the identifiable terrorist organizations that we dealt with in the 1970s and 1980s. Terrorism in the last decade has been a lot more fluid, and from these universes of like-minded fanatics, people have been able to put together these ad hoc conspiracies. Nonetheless, the magnitude of this attack, the coordination involved in this attack, does indicate a considerable considerable amount of planning and organization.
Right. Mr. Jenkins, if you'll hold for a second, I want to go back to Bob Hager of NBC. Bob, we were talking a second. Apparently, we don't have Bob at the moment. All right, let's go to Jim Kallstrom, who's the former director of the FBI's New York office. Jim, we just talked about the fact that sooner or later we'll know who did this, but where does law enforcement start? Obviously, we know that in several cases we're talking about the plane as the weapon, so to speak, but where do we start to track who's responsible?
Well, Matt, I think someone said it there, this is unprecedented. And law enforcement will start from the base of intelligence that they already have and hopefully always have. And I mean, that's the argument in the country. I mean, we have a very short memory in the United States, and maybe that's good, maybe it's bad, but that's why we need effective law enforcement. Although in a free society, as Brian Jenkins points out, and I agree with him totally, it's very, very difficult to stop things like this. I mean, the first goal would have been to stop this horrific event. And of course, the second goal now is to save as many people as we can and to find out who did it. And thirdly, and most importantly, not let something like this happen again.
Jim, if you were starting the investigation tomorrow morning, where would you begin with the man who hijacked that American Airlines flight?
I'd probably have 100 courses of action taken simultaneously. I'm sure that's what's going on as we speak. It's a bit chaos. I mean, I just look at the TWA tragedy and why we responded the way we did. We were at a heightened threat for terrorism, and it sure looked like terrorism, and this is so much bigger than that. It's chaotic, but law enforcement's trying to make sense out of it. They're trying to obviously not let something happen again in the next 10 minutes, the next hour, the next 2 hours. So that's on the mind of public safety officials in Washington and locally. And of course, a long-range plan to see what we can do about stopping this. You know, we live in a free society. People come and go. Our borders are open. We see that talked about on the news every night. Not so much from a terrorism standpoint, from a work standpoint, but people land at our major airports every day undocumented. So it's extremely difficult. As Brian pointed out earlier, these terrorist cells are very insulated from each other. There's no particular hierarchy like there was in the mafia where you put a particular wiretap in at the top and you know everything that's going on. That's not the case here. We know there's tremendous hatred. I mean, we've talked about this in law enforcement for over a decade. They blew up the World Trade Center. They tried to bring the World Trade Center down. They've blown up many other government symbols, and Ramsey Youssef tried to blow up 11 jumbo jets simultaneously.
Okay, Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's Katie Couric. We want to go to Pat Dawson, who's down at the World Trade Center with an official, talking to that official. Pat?
Yes, Katie, forgive me, we're just trying to get the, obviously, as you can imagine, Joe, go ahead, you may put the microphone on there. As you can imagine, this is a very, very difficult situation here. We are here with a couple of guests who can give us at least some insight into what's going on there. This is Chief William Hall of the Port Authority Police of New York. As we told you earlier, the Port Authority Police have jurisdiction over the Trade Center. And also Alan Rice, who's the director of the World Trade Center. Gentlemen, if I get you just to stand like that. First of all, Chief, do we have any idea of how many people are in there?
We have no idea. Now, as you know, it was pretty much rush hour time that this took place this morning, so the numbers we don't know yet. We tried to get almost everybody out that we could early on.
After the first two crashes, when the planes hit the building, there was roughly about, I would say, what, an hour and 15 minutes between that and the point where the South Tower collapsed.
Give or take.
How many people you were able to get out? Do you have any idea?
We don't know. We tried to do a floor-by-floor search. New York City Police, the Fire Department, Port Authority Police, best they could, tried to get everybody out. But as you know, there were people still coming out after that building came down.
Do you have any idea how many people would normally be in the building at 8:30 or north? This is the director of the World Trade Center.
There are probably 10,000 people in each tower. 10,000 people in each tower would typically be in there on a normal business day. And we get about another 5,000 visitors during the course of the entire day. So by 8:30, 9 o'clock, the building should have been full.
Okay, so in other words, by 8:30 to 9, you figure the building would have been approaching full capacity with the workers. So we are talking about roughly 10,000 people.
Per tower.
Per tower. Now, at this point, obviously, you've got a situation, these towers having collapsed, that is bordering on chaotic. What's the first challenge? What are you doing at this moment? I've seen emergency workers try to go in there after the first couple crashes and come running back out. What are you trying to do now?
I guess the next step is between the chief and myself and my staff. We're going to go assess the condition and determine whether it's safe or not to send personnel into the building to continue looking and evacuating people.
Are there any emergency workers in there now?
We don't know that.
We don't know.
If they were in there now, presumably they would have been trapped in there from the earlier.
It's possible. It's possible from what we saw happen there. Yeah, very much so. We were trapped ourselves in the building in the basement. We were the building collapsed and we came out of that. But yes,
you were in the basement of the South Tower.
No, we were in the basement of building 5, 6.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
and I was in building 5. We had to dig our way out to get out.
You dug your way out. What was that like?
Scary.
Scary, but I was a volunteer fireman for years, so you learn not to panic.
Yeah.
What was the one last thing? What do you do right now to try to get to those people? How long before you get to those people?
We're going to have to wait and make the building safe. We have our engineers here, our law department here. We're going to make the building safe, then we're going to send in rescue teams. We're already breaking the men and women up into rescue teams, and they're ready to go once the building is declared safe of what's left.
And how soon before they're back in there?
We're going to try and do this right now, and I hope soon.
Is any part of the building still standing down there? We can't really see.
I can't see either. I can see what you see. I don't know.
You don't even know how much of the building is left.
No, that's where we're going now, to assess the condition.
All right,
so
thank you.
very
We
much.
understand you have emergency work to do. We appreciate it very much taking the time out. The latest report that we have at this point from those who are in charge of that building, speaking to the director of the World Trade Center and also to the chief of the Port Authority Police. They are at this point, as they said, just trying to put together a plan to go in there and just assess the damage. This sequence of extraordinary tragedies, this sequence of catastrophes, really, first the 2 crashes, and then in sequence, one tower of the building coming down, another tower of the building coming down. Obviously, the first order of business is to try to organize themselves and to go back in there in a way it doesn't endanger more emergency workers, because I can tell you, based on what I've seen, there have been a number of emergency workers who were put in harm's way this morning. They had to be, but the toll has to be extraordinary. Tom, we'll throw it back to you.
Thank you very much, Pat Dawson. Those are the first numbers that we've had this morning. They think there were about 20,000 people in the 2 buildings at the time of the attack, to say nothing of the untold number of people on the streets or in nearby buildings who could also have suffered injuries or worse when the buildings did come down. This is tantamount to war. You're looking at the lower end of Manhattan. A plane has attacked the Pentagon this morning as well. There is a report of a hijacked plane that went down near Pittsburgh. NBC's Robert Hager is tracking all of this through the FAA for us. Robert?
Well, there's some more information now on the one confirmed hijacking that we know of, and that was that American Airlines flight number 11. It was a 767, took off from Boston Logan this morning. It was to go to Los Angeles. American Airlines confirmed it was hijacked, and we have some first numbers on how many were on board. 58 passengers and a crew of 11, so 69 people on that flight. That's presumed to be one of the planes that went into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. The other planes that we know of, the other tower of the World Trade Center and the plane that went that crashed into the Pentagon area, those are unknown flights. The Pennsylvania crash, which is still not the FAA, but it's local authorities saying it, our affiliate in Pittsburgh has heard traffic on the radio scanners saying that it was a flight that originated in Chicago and was headed to Cleveland, but I'd caution that that sort of information coming off radio scanners is very, very sketchy and so very unreliable, but it's the first report off the scanners.
Bob, an FBI spokesman is quoted as saying that there were 4 flights that were hijacked altogether. We know about American 11. I'm not going to mention the names of the carriers or the numbers on the others. Are you getting any kind of detail like that at the FAA?
No, the FAA is not getting into that kind of detail, and a moment ago I said that they said there were several planes still in the air, and that was a report was coming to me while I was on the air, so I'm getting it secondhand, and now I understand what they were saying is that they had unaccounted flights, flights that were unaccounted for, so that could mean, in addition to the American American Airlines Flight 11, the other planes that went into those other buildings, it does not necessarily imply that there are still planes in the air. A little more information. Canada has now shut all of its airports down, but it will leave the airports open to allow incoming planes that were bound for the U.S. and are now prohibited from landing at U.S. airports to divert into Canada. But otherwise, Canada is allowing no takeoffs, and it's not taking inbound flights from any other place other than planes that were bound for the U.S.
Well, now we get word from American Airlines, Bob, just stay with us here for a moment, that it had 2 aircraft in this tragedy. Flight 11, a Boeing 767 with 81 passengers and 9 flight attendants and 2 pilots. Flight 77, they're saying, a Boeing 757 operating from Washington Dulles to L.A. with 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. That's from Al Henkel, who's one of our guys in the Dallas area, from American Airlines.
Yes, so now we know the identity of 2 of the flights involved in today's incidents. That leaves at least 1 more, and if the report of the crash in Pittsburgh is accurate, that leaves 2 more that we don't have identified yet, but it gives us those 2 that you mentioned.
Well, it could have been both these planes could have been into the Twin Trade Towers, because it was plainly there were 2 airliners that went into the Twin Trade Towers up here, as we saw on the videotape of the crash.
Okay, they say there's a bomb in the school here. I was told by firefighters.
Pat Dawson, let's go to you in Lower Manhattan. You have a report of another bomb.
All right, Tom, we've just been told we're being evacuated. You can see all the emergency workers walking north on the West Side Highway in New York. We've been told by firefighters here that there is a report of a bomb in this building. This is a school, a high school right here. And as you can see, they're moving everybody away from this building. They've said that there's a bomb in the building. They are evacuating us north now. That is according to firefighters on the scene, and we're going to move out of here right now just to keep ourselves safe. So we're going to start walking north ourselves. But that's what we're being told by New York City firefighters here, that there were reports of a bomb in that high school right there. It's called Stuyvesant High School. And so we are walking north to get out of the way. You can see just to my left here, these are even the ambulances which were down there are being moved north. The firefighters are being moved north. Everybody is being moved north. We're being asked by the police now to go north and get out of the way. Officer, do you have any idea of what the problem is?
There's a report of a secondary device possibly in the area of this school, so they're going to move everybody back as a precaution.
Secondary device meaning a bomb?
Possibly.
Okay, and where did that report come from? Was it called in?
It came in over our radios, and it's reported through our supervisors on down, so we're pulling everybody back.
And that's in the Stuyvesant High School right there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Officer McQuaid.
Pat,
that's Officer McQuaid of New York City Emergency Service.
Pat, that school has been evacuated?
Yeah, well, I don't think there was anyone in the school, Katie, this morning. At this point, I think everybody had been evacuated from here probably when the first events took place early this morning, just because of the fact that it's so close to the World Trade Center. Most of these buildings around here have been evacuated, so I would imagine, I never saw any kids going into that school this morning, so I'm going to presume that they never even allowed them to get to school this morning, and that anywhere that were here at 8:45 were probably moved out almost within moments after the crash took place, because it literally is only about 10 blocks north of here, and I haven't seen any students coming in or out.
All right, Pat Dawson, thank you very much. The big story, obviously, that is still to be resolved is how many planes were hijacked. We now have a report that there could have been as many as 4 of them. We know that 2 planes were involved here at the Twin Trade Towers. There's a report of a plane down north of Pittsburgh. Another kind of plane went into the Pentagon, but there could still be planes in the air that are under the control of hijackers. We don't know for sure what flights they are or where they're headed. There are some unconfirmed reports of them. We can only tell you that American 11 and American 77 have been identified by American Airlines as 2 of the planes that were involved in the incidents today.
And the hijackings are scattered somewhat around a fairly wide area, and we just have to remember that 2 of these planes did arrive at the World Trade Center within 18 or 20 minutes of each other, just to, again, point out the coordination of this attack. We're going to go down to NBC's Tim Russert, who is standing by with more information. Tim? Tim? Apparently, Tim can't hear us.
All right, obviously, people are scrambling to get as much information. I think we do now
Tim,
have
do you
Tim's
hear us?
audio. Tim?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please give us your information.
I've been just speaking to the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Porter Goss, and we're trying to get him on the telephone here and continue our conversation on the air. He told me that he was on the phone with House Speaker Hastert about the situation when a code red was declared on the Hill, that the Speaker has moved to a secure place because he is in the line of command of our national leadership. Congressman Porter Goss, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, also said that this extremely well-coordinated attack could only be done by a very few people, very few organizations, and that because of the magnitude of it, it'll be relatively easy to, quote, see their fingerprints. And then we as a nation are going to have to make a very decisive retaliation as soon as we are able to identify exactly who this was. Mr. Goss said he's obviously never seen anything quite like this. As it plays out, perhaps more to come. And he will be joining us shortly on the telephone here so we all can hear his words directly. He will be briefed throughout the day because of his position. He has access to the nation's utmost secrets.
All right, Tim, obviously President Bush is on his way back to the nation's capital. Is it your understanding that he has arrived yet, or do you know his whereabouts at this point?
Katie, I do not know that, but I do know that while the White House has been evacuated, the Situation Room continues. There are people in the White House doing their jobs, and so with the Pentagon. In the nerve centers of both of those facilities, our highest-ranking officials are obviously monitoring this situation, making a determination as just how widespread this attack may be, and trying very, very hard to get a handle on exactly who did it and just how we respond.
Tim, we have secure areas, obviously, for the president in case of a nuclear attack in the past, in the mountains of Virginia, not too far from Washington by helicopter ride. Any indication that the president may have to go to one of those facilities?
We have not yet heard that, Tom. I asked that question, and the response was, we're not going there, meaning responding to my question, not necessarily traveling there. But they obviously are on the highest state of alert. They understand the magnitude of this. They understand that the American people now are going to be waiting and watching for a response from Washington other than what the president gave in Florida. As you might expect, even our most sophisticated communications 2001 era, it is still extremely difficult trying to get any kinds of information. The cell phones are down, many of the hard lines are down, but I've been assured by people at the White House and at the Pentagon that in fact they are in touch with each other and have the situation is under control the best they can, but like all of us, they simply don't know yet who did this.
Tim, you talked about Porter Goss. Obviously, the Capitol was evacuated along with other major monuments and major government buildings in Washington, D.C. Where are people, members of Congress, right now? Have they assembled anywhere, and what are they doing, and where are they?
Katie, after the explosion at the World Trade Center, Congress convened, said a prayer, and then recessed. And many of the members headed home. And they were obviously going to look forward to a very difficult week in Washington dealing with the economy. I'm told Porter Goss is on the telephone now with me. Congressman, can you hear me? Congressman Goss, can you hear me? We'll continue to effort that, Katie. But most of the congressmen have now, and congresswomen have returned to their homes here in Washington because the building itself has been evacuated. The leadership of the Congress, as I mentioned, Speaker Hassert particularly, is in a secure place, and he will be in constant communication with the President and Vice President, being the number third person in the hierarchy.
All right, Tim Russert in Washington. Tim, thanks very much. And when you get Porter Goss on the phone, maybe you can give us some more information. Thanks, Tim.
We'll be right back to you.
All right, let's go now to MSNBC's Ashley Banfield, who's in Lower Manhattan, standing by with some people who were either inside those buildings or near the buildings when those planes hit. Ashley?
Yeah, hi. I am just about between 5 and 10 blocks north of the actual site of where those two towers have come down. We're obviously having a bit of trouble right now maintaining our location because we just heard one more explosion. That's about the fourth one we've heard. The police are telling us they're either car bombs or they are simply cars that have overheated so much that they're exploding. But every time one of those happens, there's a flurry of activity, and there are more emergency vehicles that come down this road. I don't know if you can shoot past me and shoot down into that black cloud in there. That is the cloud that we were in just about 45 minutes ago or so. At the time we were there, when the first trade tower came down, my producer and I were overcome by the cloud of debris and smoke that came at us so rapidly. We had to break down a window to an apartment building. We had to break the window and go into the second door inside just to breathe. We were followed by a police officer and a security guard from the World Trade Center area. I want to show you something if I can. I'm just using a cell phone so that I can hear you because there are no cell lines that are coming out of Manhattan at the time, but see if you can zero in on this right here. This is the kind of debris that we're seeing all over the ground. If you can see the address, 1 World Trade Center, Trade Center, Trade Center, Trade Center, Trade Center.
Okay, obviously we're having some technical problems with Ashley Banfield, who is on the ground near the World Trade Center about 5 blocks away.
All right, here's the first confirmation from United Airlines. It's confirmed one of its flights crashed in the Pittsburgh area. Flight 93, a Boeing 757. The flight involved originating in Newark. It was bound for San Francisco. No information on how many people were on board. A 757 carries a lot of folks. Anyone who's flown from Newark to San Francisco knows that most of those flights carry a full load.
Okay, so this now brings to 3 the number of confirmed flights that have been involved in this tragic day. American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles, Flight 77 from Washington Dulles Airport to Los Angeles with 58 passengers on board, and now the United flight, Tom, that you just mentioned. And you can say that we have to say that the number of passengers was relatively low on those first flights, and we can only hope this was not a full flight, this United flight.
You know, there was a collapse, obviously, not just of intelligence, but of airport security as well, that many planes were hijacked almost simultaneously.
Although these days, as we know, Tom, and learned from the TWA tragedy, Flight 800, that oftentimes some of these devices are absolutely, it's impossible to see them in our kind of security X-ray machines that you have at typical airports. Some are made of plastiques. They can be very small and virtually undetectable, which is, of course, another major problem for airport security. We're going to go to Bob Bazell, who is at St. Vincent's Hospital. Obviously, we're very concerned about the people who were in the World Trade Center when these 2 planes crashed into them. Bob, tell me about the scene at St. Vincent's Hospital.
Katie, the wounded are starting to come in with great regularity now. Almost every 30 seconds an ambulance pulls up. Some of them are very badly burned. Some are dead. I've seen several dead bodies go in. Cardinal Egan, the head of the Catholic Archdiocese, is standing out on the street giving last rites. Said, "May God help us," many times over. There's been a call out for blood from all the New York hospitals. People are lined up around the block. People have responded in enormous numbers to that. Everybody seems to want to help in some way. New York has become kind of surrealistic on the streets above Lower Manhattan because all the subways and commuter lines and bridges and tunnels have been shut down. So many people who are not injured are wandering around aimlessly. But in the hospitals, there's so many injured coming in now that they don't have run out of gurneys. And they brought every office chair that they have down and put sheets over that to carry people in. It's an enormous amount of work for all the staff. People have come in. Everybody who was off has been come in. Calls have gone out for specialists, for plastic surgeons, for burn specialists. And it's going to be a very grueling several days ahead.
Well, Bob, the other thing is that I don't know whether you can tell about traffic in the rest of Manhattan, because a lot of our major hospitals are well north of there. Lenox Hill, Columbia Presbyterian, New York Cornell. Are the ambulances able to get through? Have they cleared the traffic? We're in kind of a tomb here in the studios in Midtown.
Tom, I had trouble hearing you just that time. There's a system in place here where there's triaging people down in Lower Manhattan. They're putting sometimes tags around their neck to show some people you see wandering up from Lower Manhattan who have only slight injuries, who have been cleared. Others are very seriously injured. Every hospital in the area is involved in a plan to take in some kind of patients. This one where I'm at, St. Vincent's, is one of the closest with a major trauma center. But every hospital is on alert. Every hospital is just taking in what is becoming now a sea of patients.
All right, NBC's Robert Bazell. Bob, thanks very much. Let's go back to Washington and NBC's Tim Russert, who has a guest on the phone, Porter Goss, the head of the House Intelligence Committee. Tim?
Exactly right. Congressman Goss, are you there?
I'm here, Tim.
As the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, what is your official reaction to what we've witnessed this morning?
Well, obviously, I'm horrified. We do our best to make sure there are no surprises like this happening to Americans at home or abroad. It's never 100% sure, and we got the wake-up call again today. It is unbelievable that anybody would do an act like this, basically using innocent victims aboard our commercial airliners as weapons against other innocent victims in our big buildings, our symbols of economy and commerce in New York, and our defense and legislative and executive buildings here in Washington.
When people are watching this at home, Congressman, they're saying to themselves, how could this happen in the United States of America? A complete breakdown in our airport security, a complete breakdown in our airspace security over the Pentagon, the center of our military command. How could something be this vulnerable?
Well, we are a free, open, democratic society, and we take great pride in that. We pay a price for it. We, as you know, if you've ever flown into Washington Reagan Airport, you fly right over the Pentagon. And many times we've commented on how vulnerable the building is for just that reason. That vulnerability was taken advantage of today. As for commercial airliners flying around New York and airspace there, obviously.
There is also a recognition among federal law enforcement officials that the attack on the World Trade Center is something that had to be expected, in the sense that it is the only target that Osama bin Laden and his organization have said would be a primary target in the United States, as the symbol of this nation. And it was, of course, in 1993 that it was attacked down.
Jim Stewart in Washington. Dateline, New York. A police official speaking on condition of anonymity says that the number of Trade Center casualties still unknown could be, quote, in the thousands. In the thousands. No one at this time should be particularly surprised by that, keeping in mind that incredibly, almost unbelievably, almost inconceivably, the twin towers, both towers of the World Trade Center, collapsed this morning, one shortly after the other. And having said that 50,000 people on your average day work in those towers, it should come as no surprise that a police official says that the number of Trade Center casualties still unknown could be, I want to mark that word, could be, quote, in the thousands, unquote. Now, as we said earlier, unquestionably, many lives have been lost in this attack. Many lives have also been saved. It may be the rest of the day, even longer, before we have a clear picture of how many people were killed, how many were injured, were any police or firemen in their effort. With terrorism
is that one of the weapons of terrorism is confusion. And one of the hopes now, of course, of the terrorists who perpetrated this is that we will have lots of confusion in the United States, and there will be rumors of other things happening, and that will upset how we go about our business and our behavior and how our law enforcement people react and so forth. That's one thing to deal with, and another thing to deal with, as the President alluded to this morning in his very strong statement, was that we will respond. The question is, against whom?
For the 767 in the most awful way, as you'll see in just moments, that 767 en route from Boston to Los Angeles. There you can see the black silhouette, the explosion, the flames, the destruction wreaked on the World Trade Center tower and on those below as that plane, Flight 11 from Boston to LA, crashed into the World Trade Center, causing much more destruction inside the World Trade Center and on the streets below. I now bring in Neil Cavuto, who is our business editor and responsible for a lot of our coverage here. And Neil, these are situations for which it's hard to find any words except infamy, devastation, wholesale slaughter, and heinous crime.
And really, as you pointed out before, Dave, in the heart of the financial community, 5 brokerage houses, including Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter, and American Express, have offices housed in these twin towers. Much of the world's trading in the dollar, in some of the precious metals, are done in those 2 buildings, or were done in those 2 buildings. So if you're trying to strike a damaging, lethal blow to the financial community, this is the place you hit. Many a day as a reporter did I climb these 2 towers and talk to various financial analysts, stock traders, that sort of thing. And even in the neighboring buildings, when these 2 towers tumbled, you have to be aware there are a lot of minor tertiary firms, financial firms, many of whom we've been trying to contact just to see if everyone's all right, and we've been unable to do that. Also, for the first time in history, all the major exchanges on the planet are closed. They were looking at a delayed opening on the New York Stock Exchange. They've forgotten that altogether. They're not going to do that. Global trading has stopped essentially between the 2 continents of Europe and the United States, first time in history. That has happened. So if you're trying to really deal a death blow to the United States financial community, as well as the quite literal death blow you've dealt with in the downtown parts of Manhattan today, this was the place to attack, and this was the place to do the devastation. That, of course, is Times Square we were looking at there, where also some brokerage houses are located. But I can't stress enough what this means on a symbolic level, just to be really just a few blocks away from the corner of Wall and Broad, of course, where trading it was to have commenced today. Of course, that's been called off entirely. No indications when it would ensue. I do want to also mention something else here. It's very curious, but it's a footnote that hasn't been reported. That is, the dollar was tumbling after these initial reports. It's very hard to trade the dollar right now because virtually no brokerage house is open. But it was tumbling, and that is interesting. And I suspect, and certainly I'm no analyst in this regard, but that it shows a lack of confidence in this last bastion of security, that is that the United States was deemed, and that it was hit and hit hard. And so the dollar has always benefited as this proverbial flight to quality, flight to safety, that the United States was somehow different from the rest of the world because we had a stronger economy, we were in better shape, financially, even all our problems notwithstanding, we were a safer place to go. That's being seriously called into question. I don't think genuinely or legitimately so, but traders sell first and ask questions later. And prior to the markets, the major markets closing, the dollar was tumbling.
Neil, we don't want to cause any kind of panic situation here whatsoever, but as we all know, the economy was in a down mode. We were all hoping that there would be a turnaround soon enough. Now, the United States has come back in times of tragedies.
Absolutely.
And pulled together its resources, not only militarily, not only patriotically, but also financially. Is it likely that it may do so after this, or will this in fact mean a more severe downturn than we've seen so far?
Well, you're right, but keep in mind we were just coming out of a recession the last time the World Trade Center was hit. So I think it calls into question, you know, whether this is just going to add fuel to the fire here. But it is important to point out when the last time the World Trade Center was hit, there was a knee-jerk pop in the dollar. In other words, it sold off briefly, but it did storm back. There was no storming back today. And I only mention that as an aside to show the frustration maybe the traders are expressing globally, that this last bastion appears to be less of a secure one.
Neil, word from Washington, more specific word on what's happening inside the Pentagon. The Pentagon, of course, was hit also by an aircraft, as were, of course, the Twin Towers of New York. And there is some of the devastation only beginning to be seen. U.S. Air Flight 737 crashed into the Pentagon at about 9:40 a.m. That was about an hour after the first plane crash in New York, clearly indicating that these events were coordinated. Now we are told that the fires caused by that plane crash have affected the inner workings of the Pentagon. We are told that 5 floors of a section of the Pentagon have collapsed, even notwithstanding the fact, as our own David Schuster reported, that it could have happened at a worse point. It happened at a particular heliport that was adjacent to the Pentagon. Nevertheless, the destruction of a 737 careening and smashing into a building, even if it's feet or tens of feet away from the inner parts of the Pentagon, caused destruction. 5 floors, again, of the Pentagon apparently have collapsed, but the actual workings of the Pentagon going on, we should mention, very securely at the moment. The Pentagon has vast underground facilities that go far beyond the point at which even a 737 smashing into it could cause destruction. As we talked to Caspar Weinberger moments ago, former Defense Secretary, he's stressing that the United States Armed Forces is intact, is on a state of high alert. As our reporter Rick Leventhal was reporting on the ground in lower Manhattan, he could hear Air Force or Navy jets flying overhead, securing the airspace above Manhattan to make sure that nothing else happens, nothing untoward. So once again, the Armed Forces
Technologists.
Collapse. You're looking at a live picture of it now with this Empire State Building in the foreground and the smoke.
Coming out of that scene and towards the hospitals. I'm not sure how much they've been trapped down in that area or whether they moved away and are going to some of the other area hospitals that don't come by here. But I have not seen anywhere near the number of ambulances leaving the site that one would expect.
Don, let me ask you this. Do you have and I realize this is a tough one to ask you to speculate about. After the attack occurred on the aircraft, the first aircraft attack on one tower and then the second one, how many people managed to get out of that place before they collapsed? Have you any idea? Would you see a large number, small
I saw a river of people at first running when the first attack happened. There were screams. A lot of people were looking up in shock. And then about, I would say, a minute and a half later, there was a steady stream of people moving from closer to that area, running up the streets. Then, of course, as I guess is human nature, a lot of people stopped, feeling that they were maybe far enough away that it was safe, started looking up, talking, pointing, and then the second plane hit. And that, again, caused another stream of panic. As the police started to respond and started to try to clear the streets, there was a very calm, organized evacuation of the southern part of Manhattan. I saw no panic whatsoever. It was very calm. The police were directing traffic, getting all the cars out of this area, getting all the people north. But when the first tower, the one that actually was that you saw, was the second tower hit, but the first tower to collapse, fell, then it was mass chaos. And there were thousands of people running up the streets. This billowing cloud of dust and debris came washing up over here, four blocks away, which only exacerbated the chaos of the moment. And then from then on, from the time that the first tower collapsed, there was just the street here, Church Street, was just full of people covered in dust, holding their handkerchiefs or papers over their mouths to try to breathe, moving northward away from this area. That stream trickled out, and then when the second building collapsed, once again there were more people, but this time when the second building collapsed, I witnessed firemen who were helping one another, struggling up the street, covered in debris. There was a police officer who was being carried by two other police officers trying to get out of that area. So there was obviously a lot of collateral damage with the people around that area. I would say even not just at the base of it, but for them to have gotten to my point that quickly, they would have been injured probably two and a half blocks away from where the towers fell.
Don, thanks very much. Don't go away, because you've helped us appreciate at ground level what, as I said before, seems almost surrealistic when you look at it on television. In terms of people getting out of the trade towers, do you have any sense at all, have you heard anything even anecdotally from the cops about how many people managed to get out of the building before they collapsed?
No, absolutely not. But you can imagine that the World Trade Centers, I'm not sure how many elevators exactly they have, but I have been in those buildings, and I think there are around 20 elevators in each. If they shut down immediately, you can imagine the people who would be streaming down the fire escapes and the stairwells. There's also, I don't know if it was the case now, but I do know that one of the towers had a major elevator that went all the way to the top that was malfunctioning and has been malfunctioning for at least a month. They've been having a lot of trouble with that. Not that that would have made any kind of difference, of course, once those elevators shut down. As soon as I imagine the fire alarms go on and that kind of thing, it's de rigueur that the elevators are not to be used in that situation. If the elevators go all the way to the top, and that's where the extent of the damage was at the very top of these, there's probably no way that anyone on the lower floors was able to use elevators. So they were all going down the stairwells, and one can only hope that there was quick enough reaction that they did get clear away, that they did not stop at the base.
Thank you, Don, very much. You know, somebody said, looking at the Pentagon this morning, that it reminded them of World War II. Clearly a person too young to remember World War II. But as you look at these scenes, you can feel absolutely clear that you're looking at the results of the United States at war with angry and vicious people who will do in the future, as they have in the past, whatever they can to get at the United States, this huge presence in the world, with any number of enemies in the world, with any number of people who feel the United States has messed up their lives or their countries or their movements or impeded them from something. And so, in fairness, without being too carried away with it, we are looking at pictures from a war zone this morning. Not a picture, something that looks like a war zone, looked like an old war zone, but it's a picture of a current war zone in this endless battle between the United States and its enemies, usually small groups of enemies. We're talking into countries to some extent here, but we're talking about the most unconventional form of warfare, that man engages in, which is terrorism. Designed to cause terror, designed to have an impact on the psychology of Americans, designed to show that the United States is vulnerable. What better expresses American vulnerability than to watch these two symbols of American commerce and government and pride at the lower end of Manhattan collapsing in upon themselves after having been attacked by two hijacked aircraft. That is what it looks like at the moment. Looking out, this from the top of the ABC building, and we're like 60, 70 blocks, 60 blocks north, more than 60 blocks north of the trade centers, and as we look down, that's what they look like under normal circumstances. We can see them from almost anywhere in the city, and people go to the top of them on a regular basis so that they can see the huge surrounding area, including, I might add, right in their face, the Statue of Liberty on a day like today. And they are both gone. Now, just to deal with the possibility of the missing United Airlines flight, the mayor of Cleveland, Michael White, says that a Boeing 767 out of Boston has made an emergency landing at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport because of concerns that it may have a bomb aboard. There is some possibility that may be the missing United flight, but we do not know. But anybody who's in an aircraft this morning and made an emergency landing safely is probably one hugely relieved person at the moment. I want to go back to Washington. Claire Shipman is just across Lafayette Park from the White House. It's a traditional place in which we broadcast from when we're covering White House and Washington affairs. Claire, do we know where the president is at the moment?
Well, Peter, that's what we've been trying to figure out. I've been told by sources that Air Force One hasn't landed yet. What we're trying to figure out is, as you were talking about earlier, where that plane will land and where the president will go. The Secret Service have essentially told me, we have an emergency plan in place for exactly this sort of thing, and of course, we're not going to tell you where we take our protectees, including the president. And there was some question about whether he would even land, as he normally does, at Andrews Air Force Base. Now, there is a small press pool traveling with him on Air Force One. I've been told they may stick fairly close with him once he does land, so we may learn something more. But in addition, the entire staff of the White House and the old Executive Office building, State Department, has been scattered around town. There's no reaching anybody from the NSC, the press office. They're all trying to set up temporary offices, and at some point they may have them up and running. But right now, there's very little information about how.
Now, someone who both in fact and fiction has dealt with justice, and that's author Tom Clancy.
Mr. Clancy, this is, I guess, a terrible case of life imitating art.
I suppose you could say that. It's a noteworthy incident. I mean, it's not the sort of thing it's the sort of thing that's best left in a novel rather than in real life. Unfortunately, one of the problems with being an author is keeping up with reality.
But Mr. Clancy, you also are very well plugged into this world. From your own knowledge, how concerned have the authorities been that something of this scale could possibly hit on American soil?
It's Jeff Greenfield, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, Jeff, you've been here to the House. I mean, it's. I had a conversation some years ago with an Air Force general about the possibility rather like this, and I ended up putting in one of my books where you go where a bad guy takes an aircraft into the Capitol building during a joint.
Cause, of which there was, I think, a considerable amount. Seeing people dance in the streets over a tragedy of this magnitude is not going to do the cause any.
Camp David. President Bush on his way, presumably back to Washington. The White House has air fighter cover and has had such since the first reports of the World Trade Center attacks. President Bush says it's an apparent terrorist attack. It's clear that one of the suspects in this is the worldwide, what has been described as the worldwide terrorist network of Osama bin Laden. However, let us mark well that nobody knows who's responsible for these apparently coordinated attacks on selected targets in America today. that out of London, a Saudi dissident who is connected with Osama bin Laden pointed out today, this is Mr. Abdel Bari Atwan, editor of a London-based Arabic newspaper, said, and I quote him, Islamic fundamentalists led by bin Laden were, quote, almost certainly behind the attack on the World Trade Center in New York. This is this one man's opinion. This man, who is well connected with Osama bin Laden, says it is most likely the work of Islamic fundamentalists. Osama bin Laden warned 3 weeks ago that he would attack American interests in an unprecedented attack, a very big one. Atwan told Reuters, and he said that he personally received information that Osama bin Laden was planning very, very big attacks against American interests, unquote. Now, those are the quotes of one man in London. We want to underscore, italicize, put in all caps, nobody knows who's responsible for these attacks. Osama bin Laden gets blamed for almost everything in the way of this kind of attack around the world. There's been considerable controversy and debate in the upper reaches of Western diplomacy and intelligence agencies about whether he alone is capable of pulling off these kinds of attacks. But all of that will be for later to sort out. Clearly, someone had coordinated attacks on these selected targets. Byron Pitts, our CBS News correspondent, is on the telephone from the tip of Manhattan. Byron.
Dan, we're about 3 blocks away from where the planes crashed into the buildings. Joining me now is a security officer in the World Financial Center who was there when the first plane struck the building. Sir, what can you tell us?
Okay, all I can tell you is that roughly at about 10 minutes to 9, I was in the lobby of one of the buildings of the World Financial Center when I heard a rumble. I went outside. I saw the first plane strike the side of the building. There was a lull. A fire started in the top of the World Trade Center building, and then about 5 minutes later, a second plane struck. Debris everywhere. People jumping out of windows of the World Trade Center trying to save themselves. Literally jumping to their deaths.
Did you have the opportunity at all to evacuate some of the floors in the building you were in?
Yes, we did. Quick thinking of our forces there, decided to get everybody out as quick as possible after the first plane struck. That little lull period before the second one came helped us greatly in getting thousands of people out of one of our buildings.
Did you actually see the plane strike the building?
I saw the second plane strike the side of the building because I was outside evacuating employees from our building at that time. That was when we witnessed people jump into their deaths literally from the side of the World Trade Center building while it was engulfed in flames.
You were saying you've been near the scene recently. What was the situation there?
The situation there was that about 15 to 20 minutes later, the structure that was remaining of the World Trade Center buildings caved in and fell straight to the ground, literally covering everybody that was within a quarter-mile radius of that building. Myself included was stuck in the lobby area until the fire department came and got me out.
You were saying that, I've heard you on the radio talking to some of your colleagues. What's the latest information you're getting from the scene?
The latest information right now is that we have major gas leaks in that area, and they're making the area totally sterile around the World Trade Center and the World Financial Center area due to these gas leaks, because we've been having mini explosions happening from underneath because of all the carnage.
Can you get an explanation as to why cell phones in this area aren't working right now?
I can tell you the reason why a lot of the phones aren't working, and that's because the main transmission site that was on top of the World Trade Center controls a lot of those phones, and obviously it's no longer there, therefore eliminating cell phone coverages for quite a few people.
Everybody who was near you, all those people got away, yes, safely?
Most of them did, sir. Some of them didn't. A lot of emergency service personnel were also injured. Obviously, there are casualties also. A lot of media trucks, a few of them were damaged also, as well as NYPD and fire department vehicles who could not evacuate the area in time when the 2 towers came down to the ground.
You said you'd seen this kind of thing when you lived overseas. Tell me about that.
I happened to be in Europe and England back in 1993 when the IRA had struck Camden Town with a bomb. There was a lot of carnage there. The IRA, as you know from past history, do a lot of this kind of thing in mainland England. But I can tell you, sir, that there has never, ever in my witness of anything like this, being in this business for a long time, have I witnessed anything as to what I've seen today in mainland New York City.
Thank you, sir. The gentleman is a security officer in the World Financial Center. Dan, I'm going to pass the phone on to my colleague, Mika Brzezinski, who has another eyewitness. We've been held up in PS 89 Elementary School, a few blocks from the building, and grabbing people as they come by. Here's Mika.
Yeah, and Byron, one note on PS 89, I just spoke to the head custodian here, and he says for emergency workers or anybody in the area, there is water and food available here. Dan, I know you have new information. I'll send it back to you.
Thank you very much. Mika Brzezinski and Byron Pitts on the scene where the World Trade Centers have collapsed. We want to put up again for you, if we can, the airlines have confirmed that 4 aircraft were hijacked this morning, and the information on that, we're coming up to the top of the hour, we'll have as we go through the top of the hour. But it's noon in New York, just over 3 hours now since the first plane crashed into the first of the World Trade Center towers. This is CBS News continuing live coverage of this incredible act of horror and terror, this cowardly act unlike any other this country has ever seen, a series of coordinated terror attacks against the United States. Now, here is the sequence of events that happened with the huge twin towers of the World Trade Center here in New York City. They've now been destroyed. 110 stories. They collapsed after they were hit separately by 2 planes, apparently hijacked, striking minutes apart. In Washington, the Pentagon also came under attack. In an unprecedented response, all flights in this country have been grounded indefinitely. The entire country is on alert. In New York, there's a full terrorism alert. The congressional leadership has been taken to an undisclosed secure location. President Bush, at last report, was flying from Florida to Washington. Now, this is the timeline of what happened this morning. 9 a.m., the South Tower was hit. Shortly after that, the North Tower was hit. 9:30, traffic in the U.S. closed. President Bush spoke. At 10 a.m., a plane crashed at or near the Pentagon, and the South Tower collapsed. Then at 10:30, the North Tower collapsed. And at between 10:30 and 11 o'clock, a big plane crash reported in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. Then at or about 11 o'clock, we begin to get additional information about the fact, and it now apparently is a fact, that 4 separate aircraft were hijacked. Now, Senator Chuck Hagel, a Republican of Nebraska, says, well, what we had said earlier in the morning, that this is the second Pearl Harbor. I don't think I can overstate it. We called it earlier the Pearl Harbor of terrorism. Whatever you want to call it, this was a series of coordinated attacks. In the case of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, devastatingly effective. This is a live picture of the smoke that's been bellowing out of the collapsed Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, and no doubt it will go on for hours into the night and possibly on into the morning. Now, I want to show you the sequence of events that happened with those Twin Towers this morning. The aircraft came from the right. I repeat, this is an actual photograph, not just a graphic made up by us. Flames spewed out of that World Trade Center tower. Then one of the towers began collapsing. The hope was it would be only partially collapsed, but the hope was not fulfilled. The tower came down. And then as that awful fact was being absorbed, the second World Trade Center collapsed. Witnesses below screamed. Some were caught in the avalanche of cascading debris, concrete and steel. The mayor of New York says there'll be a tremendous loss of life. A police spokesman, speaking anonymously, said many thousands have died. In Washington, where the Pentagon, an aircraft came down at or near the Pentagon. Another aircraft reported crashing near Camp David, the presidential retreat. There's some doubt about what the facts are in that situation. to get a live picture at the Pentagon now to sort out some of what's happened in Washington. We go to CBS News correspondent Bob Orr. Bob?
Well, Dan, the pictures are just overwhelming, and frankly, the people I deal with on a daily basis are not really prepared to deal with the depth of the devastation. As we look at the Pentagon picture here, I can tell you that I just spoke to the FAA a short time ago, and they are now confirming what other agencies have said for a while, that at least 4 large commercial airliners have been involved in today's attack, and there may be a 5th. We know, we've been putting the information on the screen, that there are at least 2 large passenger jets from United Airlines and 2 others from American Airlines. And to give people a firm grasp of this, each of these planes, as you see the flights now listed on the screen, each of these planes is the equivalent of a flying bomb. These are large airplanes, 757s, 767s. There's a terrible human component here. The 757 can carry about 240, 250 people. The 767, depending on the configuration, even more than that. So we're talking about the possibility of 800 to 1,000 people just on the airplanes. Each of the airplanes also is heavily loaded with fuel. I don't know, because we don't have the manifest, how much fuel was on each plane, but it's a reasonable guess. It could be 15,000 pounds, maybe 20,000 pounds. There's a tremendous heat source, a tremendous force, and you can imagine, and we saw in the pictures, just how devastating that is. When one of these planes crashes anywhere in the world, it's a catastrophe of a major proportion. To know that 4 now have crashed, and in populated areas, and apparently as the result of a deliberate act, really is an act that describes any, or escapes any kind of description. The FAA is a little hesitant with the information today because, frankly, the shots are being called from higher up. The White House, National Security Council, and the FEMA emergency response people are all giving the marching orders. It's going to be some time before we know how many people were on the planes, where the flight crews were from. We know where they were flying to and from, but before we know anything about the human side of this. And then the big question is, how could it happen? How could presumably terrorists of any sort, hijackers, take over 4 commercial airline planes all in a very, very compacted period of time? It's an indictment of the Federal Aviation Administration security system, and it is one that will have far-reaching implications. And beyond that, Dan, it's now also shutting down the entire aviation system. It seems to be a secondary point when we're talking about devastation this large and the number of lives that obviously have been lost. But for the first time in the nation's history, the entire commercial aviation system is shut down. And in speaking to a couple of authorities this morning, I'm not all that certain it will be up and running again tomorrow. So this has really hit at the heart of America, at the heart of our infrastructure, and has paralyzed a system that, frankly, many people thought was impenetrable. Dan?
Well, Bob Orr, in Washington, be plenty of time to assess blame and where things need to tighten up, but when the question is asked, how could this happen in and around an airport, anybody who's been in an American airport in recent years would know how it could happen. That no matter what security measures were taken, just to look around your average airport would tell you that it had a lot of holes in the security, but all of that is for later on. NATO Secretary General George Robertson called today's attack, quote, an intolerable aggression against democracy. Secretary of State of the United States, the distinguished retired Army General Colin Powell, said to Latin American foreign ministers, he was in Peru, this is a, quote, terrible, terrible tragedy has befallen my nation, but it has befallen all of those who believe in democracy. What you're looking at live from the tip of Manhattan is a new face of war. You've heard talk about the terrorism, the war on terrorism, the war being waged by terrorism. Take a good look. This is what it's about. We've said for years that terrorism would soon be coming to America. It began coming here big time in the 1990s with the first attack on the World Trade Center and other terrorist attacks. There is a war. It's a 21st century kind of war. It's war by sneak attack, in this case a devastatingly effective one. We have some photographs of these photographs taken from above and from afar. It's almost impossible to conceive of the death and injury, the blood and the screams of the dying when you have a picture this far away. There is someone leaping or perhaps in fear forced, you saw that body come down the side of the building. The second plane hit the other tower at this time, is our belief. I'm just going to let the pictures speak for themselves for a moment. Here, a Dante-esque scene such as this repeated over and over again this morning. That area of Manhattan, New York City, once occupied by the majestic World Trade Center buildings, an indescribable scene of death and destruction. Where it was real blood and real screams of the dying, people seen leaping or being forced out of the building at fairly high levels. And when those buildings collapsed, that concrete and steel that came crashing down covered a wide area, a horrific sequence of destruction. And then there's this strange event, perhaps series of events that happened in Pennsylvania. Russ Mitchell has details on that.
Dan, that's right. One of the planes that was hijacked this morning apparently crashed outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, near the Somerset County Airport. This was United Airlines Flight 93 traveling from Newark to San Francisco. United Airlines has now assigned a number for families of victims to call. That number is 800-932-8555. Again, that's 800-932-8555. That's the number for families of victims of United Flight 93, which was hijacked this morning. It was en route from Newark to San Francisco and crashed outside of Pittsburgh. And Dan, as you're right, we watched this. It's surreal. We were just talking about it in the newsroom. It's like watching a movie. It really is. Only, of course, it's not.
The new face of war. And in Washington, where the Pentagon has been hit with at least some injured, if anybody's been killed, we're not yet aware of it, but we'll say that very little, if any, information has been coming from the Defense Department itself, and that is not a criticism. Understandably, they're focused at the Pentagon on trying to handle the situation. Now, President Bush was, at last report, flying from Florida, presumably to Washington, but we don't know that he's actually coming to Washington. We are told that the Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney, is in charge at the White House at this moment. He's in the Situation Room, which is below ground level in the White House. Those of us who covered the White House over the years, been down there many times. It's your Situation Room deep in the bowels of the White House. Told that Vice President Cheney is in charge there. Condoleezza Rice, who directs the National Security Council, and their chiefs of staff are down there with them, coordinating government responses. And the Situation Room is being run by Vice President Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice, who formerly at Stanford University and now runs the National Security Council, while President Bush returns to Washington, if indeed that is his final destination. Again, let's pause and let the picture